morning, and thanks for your patience this morning. We received a call for service from a resident of this community this morning who described a van as being parked on a residential street for an extended period of time. Two of our Fairfax County police officers were dispatched to check out this van that was described as suspicious in nature and not known to the community and parked in a residential community for I think at least 24 hours. So our police officers got here, they confirmed that the tag on the van was stolen out of North Carolina, and they called for a tow truck. When the tow truck got here, after many minutes, they were positioned behind the car and beside the car, and the side door of the van opened suddenly, and the occupant, a 34-year-old man, came out of the van from a seated position, armed with a carbine-style rifle. A carbine rifle is nothing more than a short-barrel rifle. It had a magazine of 9mm ammunition in it, and it had attached to it two other magazines of 9mm ammunition. The 34-year-old occupant of the van raised the carbine in the direction of our police officers, and one of our two police officers discharged his firearm several times, striking the occupant of the van. The occupant of the van is described in stable condition right now in a local hospital. I'm not going to name who he is at the moment, but I can tell you he's 34 years old. He's currently wanted in Fairfax County on failure to appear charges for firearm-related offenses and drug-related offenses. I personally walked up to the van to check it out because it was being described to me as a place where someone had lived for an extended period of time. And certainly, I've personally never seen so many things inside of a minivan. This man was clearly living in this minivan. There were many items in the minivan, and in fact, he had dark curtain rods assembled inside the minivan that appeared to separate the front two seats from the rest of the vehicle. The windows around the minivan were very tinted, so that question I asked about our ability to see inside of the van before we towed it, and clearly it's heavily tinted windows, and the interior of the van is difficult to see because of the nature of the items inside the van and the fact that there are curtain rods that are assembled. So our police officers perceived a threat. One of our police officers, who actually grabbed the nearby tow truck driver and pulled him out of the way when the carbine rifle was observed, sustained a minor injury, but she pulled him out of the way, and she also recovered what we're now describing as a replica handgun from this person's jacket pocket. So the person that was shot this morning was wanted on firearm and drug charges. He was armed with a loaded carbine-style rifle, one magazine and two magazines attached to it. He raised the carbine-style rifle in the direction of our police officers who perceived a deadly threat, and one of our two police officers discharged his firearm, striking the suspect. Non-fatally, he's being treated at a local hospital for his injuries. We certainly realize the dangers associated with our profession. The police officers, and we're not naming them now. We certainly will. It's our policy to do so. It's our policy, again, and you all know this in the local media, to show our body camera footage to the local community, to the media. I saw the body camera footage myself this morning in this command bus right behind me, and it depicts exactly what I'm describing to you. Police officers confronted with a deadly threat. They acted, and we are here today to stand ready to answer any questions you may have from the gallery. We will talk about this next within a matter of days when we release our body camera footage to the community.
Suspect was only shot once.
Well, I can't tell you how many times he was shot. I can say that our discharging police officer who fired his gun, fired several times. I don't know exactly how many, but our suspect was struck at least once. I don't have that definitively.
Does the suspect have any ties to this area, any relatives in this area that would
He has, that was one of our questions. What ties does this suspect have to Fairfax County? He certainly has ties to Fairfax County. He's wanted in Fairfax County for firearm-related offenses and drug-related offenses. We don't know why he chose this particular neighborhood to park his van. And again, he was clearly living out of his van. It seems like most, if not all, of his personal belongings were inside that van where he was inside of. It seems like very logically he took great steps to ensure that there were curtain rods and dark curtains inside the van as well. He's been living in that van for a while, and I don't know why he chose this neighborhood to park.
And was it parked where it is now for the extended period of time?
You know, the 911 caller this morning described the van was parked there for at least 24 hours. So where you see the van parked right now is where the van has been as described to us for at least 24 hours. When I watch the body camera footage, you can see our suspect open the door from the inside. You can see our suspect when he drops to the ground after he was shot. You can see the carbine rifle drop to the ground as well. And then when you see our officers approach the suspect in an effort to take him into custody and to render first aid, you can see our secondary police officer recover a replica style pistol from our suspect's jacket pocket.
I know you said that it was difficult to view inside the vehicle, but were there any attempts to knock on the vehicle?
Well, all that's under review. The two police officers were here for quite some time before they called for a tow truck. So by the time the tow truck was here, they were continuing to gather information to complete their tow report, and that's when the suspect opened up the side door of the van and emerged with the carbine style rifle. But we were here for quite some time before we encountered this man, who was inside the van the entire time.
Chief, is it clear from the police camera video that this man aimed the rifle at the officers?
Well, the video footage, Paul, that I saw, and we had independent witnesses as well, several in fact, described our suspect as opening up the door of the van, the side door, describe our suspect as possessing the carbine-style rifle, and they describe our suspect as raising the rifle in the direction of our police officers. So that's what's been described to us. And I can tell you the body camera footage that I've seen so far supports it.
The suspect say he come out?
What's that?
Which door did he come out?
The left sliding door.
Left sliding.
So
Not
not
sliding
the
doors on both
driver's
sides.
door.
In fact, you all probably can't get close enough to the van to see this, but there is no room for a human being to sit inside that van other than where our suspect was seated in the left rear bucket passenger seat. So the two front seats and the two middle seats, they're both bucket seats in the middle. Our suspect was seated in the left middle seat. There is no other room inside that entire van for any other human being to be seated. That's how crowded the van is. And I only say that to emphasize that he's been living in this van for some time now. We don't know why. I don't know what his family circumstances are. We intend to find all that out as we do a thorough investigation of all these cases. Our Internal Affairs Bureau is here along with major crimes. We've already had contact with the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office, as we always do from the scenes of these incidents. But we're going to thoroughly investigate, thoroughly review. And I'll just say this too. And I know I said this recently. Thank God our profession has body-worn cameras. They really put police leadership and detectives and residents and the local media in a position to see, touch, and feel what the officers were experiencing at the moment where they made a decision to use potentially deadly force.
Would you say it was a surprise when the man opened the door?
Paul, I don't know if I'd describe it as a surprise. I don't believe our two police officers knew that someone was inside the van because we had been here for several minutes. In fact, long enough for a tow truck to be requested, long enough for a tow truck to respond to the scene. So at the time that the suspect opened up the side door to the van, I believe our police officers did not know anyone was inside the van. I believe that likely took them by surprise, but what also likely took them by surprise was the fact that our suspect was armed, clearly armed with a carbine-style rifle. And again, I think I described the carbine-style rifle as having one magazine of 9mm ammunition loaded in the chamber, and it had two additional magazines of 9mm ammunition attached to the carbine rifle itself.
Chief, do you know whether the person who called in had ever gone up to it, knocked on the window, investigated, told me that there might be a guy living in the van in front of the house?
The call for services that I reviewed don't indicate that our 911 caller made any attempts to interact with the van or its occupants. And I'll say this, we really don't want people doing that in the first place. When people see something that looks out of place and appears to be suspicious in nature, or folks who observe suspicious behaviors, we want them to call the police. We want them to call us so we can get out there and do that. So again, I believe the nature of the 911 call is that a resident saw a van parked for at least a day in a residential neighborhood, dark tinted windows, out of state tags, received that as not the norm of the neighborhood. And again, in fact, I think I said this, the tag attached to the van was stolen out of North Carolina. Our suspect, again, was wanted on firearm charges and drug charges here in Fairfax. Again, that's one of the first questions we asked as well. Right now, that mental health history is unknown. I don't have any history to speak of. Sometimes we'll have that early on, like right now, and I can speak to it or allude to it. Right now, none of that information exists for me to speak to. But again, by the time we do a follow-up press conference, when we show the body camera footage, I may have more in terms of his mental health.
So 2 more questions, guys.
If the van itself was stolen out of North Carolina,
So we're in the process of investigating the nature of the van itself, but right now the tags, the rear tag that was attached to it, was stolen out of North Carolina. So we've got a stolen tag out of North Carolina, and that's what prompted the tow truck request, the impound request from our two police officers.
So to be clear, he stepped out with the rifle already in his hand? How quick was it by the time he lifted the rifle and the officer shot?
So, and again, the nature of body camera footage, we all want answers really fast. And thankfully, I'm able to come to the scene and get a lot of answers. Not all the answers, but I'm able to get a lot of my questions answered by viewing the body camera footage. So I'll say that our two police officers were outside of the van when the sliding door opened. When the sliding door opened, our police officers saw, and the body camera footage supports this, they saw our suspect holding, armed with a carbine-style rifle, 9mm ammunition. We have residents who are serving as witnesses who support that observation, and again, our body camera footage supports it as well. I'll say this, none of these police officers woke up this morning desiring to get involved in a police emulsion. We certainly train to de-escalate. We train to use cover and concealment. We train unlike any other police department I've ever been associated with. But when confronted with deadly force, these two police officers, and I can say this because, again, I viewed the body camera footage and I'm privy to several witness statements taken from local residents, were forced to make a deadly force scenario decision. They did so. I join you and others wishing for a speedy recovery of the suspect who sustained gunshot wounds. We certainly wish him well, and his family is undoubtedly concerned about him, and they undoubtedly have questions that we hope to answer in the near future as well. We're also handling our police officers and offering them, world-class services when they're involved in a traumatic event like this as well. So it's a traumatic event for everyone involved, and that's why we see so many Fairfax County resources here today.
Chief, did the suspect step out of the van, or did he open the door and raise the weapon?
So I'll say that again preliminarily, the door comes open. The suspect is observed by our police officers armed with the carbine-style rifle. Whether a foot or 2 feet were on the ground or not yet on the ground, I'm going to wait for the investigation to kind of sort that out. And again, you're going to see the same body camera footage that I just saw here in a matter of days. Our critical release policy that is new to the Fairfax County Police Department, new to policing. We promise our community to release body camera footage of critical incidents just like this one within 30 days. And that's a maximum. So it's certainly our intention to do that as soon as possible.
Is there an exchange of words?
So witnesses described to our detectives who were investigating on the scene that our police officers were telling him to drop the gun several times. When I watched and listened to body camera footage, I hear the police officer who discharged his firearm telling the person to drop the gun several times. So our police officers were doing what they were trained to do. They were giving verbal commands to an armed person under a lot of stress. The armed person did not drop his firearm. That's when the discharging occurred. And then again, like I described, you can see on the body camera footage the carbine rifle drop to the asphalt after the suspect sustained at least one gunshot.
Shot fired.
So I'll describe the number of shots fired as several. I learned many years ago not to give out an exact number until I know the exact number. But more than one shot was fired by one police officer. So there were 2 police officers on the scene. Only one of the 2 discharged his firearm. The other officer, and I think I described this as well, was near a tow truck, the tow truck driver, and assisted getting him out of harm's way. That same officer, the witness officer, also, you see this on body camera footage, recovered the replica pistol from our suspect.
Were they both male officers or was it a female officer?
2 young police officers, 1 male, one female. Our suspect is either 31 or 32 years old.
And how long would you say they were on the scene before they
Several minutes, well, long enough for them to request a tow truck, long enough for the tow truck to get on the scene. But I believe preliminarily, and our investigation is going to sort this all out, I believe that our police officers and the tow truck driver, quite frankly, and the folks who called 911 had no idea that anyone was necessarily inside that van. And as you get closer to the van and as you observe the van and take a look at what it looks like from the outside looking in, dark to the windows, and then when you take a look at what it looks like inside it is floor to ceiling of personal effects and personal belongings. There are gasoline containers inside the car. Clearly someone's been living in there for quite some time. Long enough, in fact, for the person to actually assemble dark curtain rods inside the car.
Chief, based on everything that you've seen and said, is there anything you feel
Well, I tend to reserve my constructive remarks about our performances until the investigation is further on its way. I think the expectation that our community has, certainly local and national media has, is that police leadership is going to arrive on the scene of a critical incident like this one, view the technology that's now available to our profession, body cameras. The Exxon body camera footage is an extraordinarily useful tool to not only our detectives, but to me, because I'm able to look and see it and offer you a preliminary assessment. My preliminary assessment, I am very comfortable in saying that our police officers were confronted with a deadly scenario